Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I will be going through some spring recommendations. So I'm not the most seasonal of reader, so recommendations for the seasons is a little difficult for me. There's certainly certain seasons that are easier, like fall. You recommend more thrillers, horrors, maybe some cozy mysteries, some high fantasy, things like that. And then the summer, you might lean more towards literary fiction and romance. But in the spring, I do continue to kind of read a little bit of everything. So rather than recommending books where the themes are kind of spring vibes, I decided to do books where the cover is more spring vibes. So in other words, books with flowers on the cover. I want to go ahead and point you to my romance, a recommendation that I did back in February, I believe, since spring is kind of a month where a lot of people start to want to read more romances. So there are plenty of recommendations on there for you to enjoy. So I have 10 books on this list. I believe three of the books are duologies. So I guess there is a total of 13 books on this list. But without further ado, I will go ahead and jump right in. So the first book I want to talk about is The Last Quintista by Donna Barba Higuera, and this I believe is a middle grade story. It is a sci-fi. In this story, our main character is a young girl, and she and her family are placed on a spaceship that is heading to a new planet. There is a meteor that is heading towards planet Earth, and we are now evacuating very specific people. Her family is on this ship because her parents are well-known scientists. They're going to go into cryogenic sleep for the next few hundred years and are supposed to wake up on this new planet and start building a new life there. Unfortunately, some bad things happen. One of the ships is destroyed by people who are trying to get onto it. They don't want to be left behind on a dying planet, and that ship ends up crashing. That ship did have all the politicians, all the diplomats, people like that on board, and therefore the people on her ship decide that they are going to take on the teachings of a cult that was forming on planet Earth that was very focused on equality. And the cult's idea of equality was making sure that everybody is the same, and it's a very rigid system. Our character ends up having a glitch in her pod, so rather than being brainwashed like everyone else in their pods, she still remembers planet Earth. She is also a storyteller, and she uses her storytelling abilities to try to kind of wake up some of the other people that are in the pods, to have them realize that this cult that is in power is incredibly dangerous and could lead to the destruction of the human race. There were definitely parts of this book that I really enjoyed. I thought that there was a lot of interesting things that were occurring plot-wise. I thought that the author did a really good job keeping one invested in the story. I really enjoyed having the opportunity to learn about how this cult developed over the course of a few hundred years on this isolated spaceship. I also enjoyed getting to explore a little bit of the new world that they were going to, as well as our characters' drive to save her people. This book is a little bit on the darker side. Our character does face a lot of tragedy and loses a lot of people that she loves and cares about, and also has to face some really difficult decisions. I definitely think that this book could have gone even further with the storytelling, and that would have brought a lot more enjoyment to the story, in my opinion. Up next, we have a nonfiction, and that is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. This is a YA memoir written by a queer Black man. He talks about his time, I believe, from childhood to about college age, or early 20s or so, and just talks about his experience of realizing that he is queer, and just coming to accept that, and the struggles that he had to face from outside forces to become the person that he wants to be. It has been a while since I read this, so I don't remember too many of the details. I should probably revisit some of my tabs that I have in here, but I do remember really enjoying this story and just getting to learn about his experience, because it is made for a YA audience. This is a really great starting point for people that want to look into either memoirs or queer literature. Next, we have another YA story, and that is Felix Ever After by Kaysen Callender. This is a story that follows a trans main character who is dead named at their school, and it's just about them trying to figure out who is dead naming them, and who is posting, I believe, even pictures of them before their transition, as well as them trying to find a romance with a school friend as well. Felix at times was a little bit of a frustrating character, just because they were facing a lot of insecurities, and it took quite some time for them to overcome those securities, but watching them on that journey was a very heartwarming experience. There was also a lot of side drama that was going on that made this book really difficult to put down. Next, I want to talk about the two books that I don't have physical copies of before I forget about them, and that is the Tea Monk, the Robot and the Tea Monk duology. I don't remember what the duology is called, but the first one is called The Psalm of the Wild Built, and the second one is called A Prayer for the Crown Shy, and that is by Becky Chambers. These are a duology of novellas, and we are following Bex. I feel like I forgot their name last time, but I'm pretty sure it's Bex, and Mosscap. Oh my gosh, I'm terrible with character names. If there's one thing that you learn from this channel, it is that I'm terrible at character names. Anyway, these two characters in the first book stumble across each other while our monk is out in the wilds just trying to find something that will bring them a greater sense of purpose. Mosscap wants to know what the human race needs, and throughout the first book they have this discussion between each other, and in the second book they set out to ask people all throughout the land what humans need. These stories have a lot of great messages in them, but they're also just a really kind of relaxing, slow-paced, and heartwarming experience to listen to. I did listen to both of them as audiobooks. I really enjoyed watching the characters' relationship develop throughout the two stories, as well as watch their interactions with the different people that they come across throughout the story. The writing of the story was also really well done, and I thought that the ending was very satisfying. Up next, we have Volume 2 of Heaven Official Blessing, which is a little bit more spring vibes than Volume 1. But in these books, we are following Shilon, I believe is his name. Yes. And he is, or was, a prince of a very prosperous nation, and he was very well beloved by his people. At the age of 17, he ascended to the heavens and became a god. However, many years later, his world or his kingdom falls into a really terrible and bloody war, and against the advice of the other gods, he tries to help and ends up kind of making everything worse, therefore becoming a god of misfortune and being banished from the heavens. At the beginning of book 1, we follow him as he ascends to heaven for the 3rd time. And it's been about 800 years since he first ascended, and he is definitely seen as a bit of a laughingstock of the heavens, and he's just kind of there trying to mind his own business. He opens his own little shrine because at this point, being a god of misfortune, no one else has built a shrine for him, and is just trying to go on missions, fighting ghosts and other supernatural beings. He also stumbles across a guy named San Long, and this is someone who becomes a close companion of his. A lot of people don't trust San Long because they believe him to be a very dangerous and deadly person. However, Shilon has only seen the good side of him, and we get to see their relationship kind of develop throughout these books. These books are a lot of fun. I would say they're pretty much like 3.5 reads for me. They're pretty easy to get through to a degree. There's definitely a lot of backstory and a lot of characters that are in the story. It was an online novel that was then put into different volumes. So sometimes things seem not to have the greatest pacing or the most comfortable flow to them, but at the end of the day, I do have a great time with these, and I'm looking forward to continuing this series. Up next, we have a book that I didn't quite know if I should put on here. I read this a few years ago, but it's one of those books that has really stuck with me, and that might be because the book might be a little bit taboo, a little bit problematic. So just a heads up, don't judge me too harshly for liking this book. It was just so different, and therefore it was quite impactful. And that is The House of Gentlemen by Kathy Hepstall. This book follows a woman who was sexually assaulted by, I think, 3 men. And in her town, there is a house called the House of Gentlemen. And this is a place where men who have committed violent acts against women and want to change go, and they serve women there. It's not in any way sexual. They very much, they talk to the women, they serve them tea, they make sure that the women feel very safe and very comfortable in this environment. And her wanting to recover from this traumatic experience, decides one day that she will give this house a try, and actually ends up seeing one of the men that had sexually assaulted her there. She decides to choose him as the person that will care for her, and they actually end up falling in love. This is very much like a redemption story. This man let himself be put into a position where he wasn't strong enough to say no, and did something that he really didn't want to do, and in the process hurt this woman. And in this book, he's very much trying to make up for that. So I just remember this story is just something that really stuck with me. I do need to reread it, and upon reread, we'll go ahead and see if, maybe it's more problematic in my adult brain than it was in my teenage brain when I initially read this. But if it sounds like something you might be interested in, I think it might be worth giving it a shot because it's definitely different than other things that I've read. The next book we have is Circe by Madeline Miller. In this book, we follow the witch Circe in her time before and after she was banished to her island. This book is from her point of view, so we very much get to see how kind of miserable her life was. She doesn't have a very happy life. Her family was not good to her, and she experienced a lot of sadness and trauma throughout her life. So this isn't like a happy spring book or anything like that, but I think Madeline Miller is an incredible author, and she really brought Circe to life. In this story, we get to come across a lot of really recognizable characters, such as Odysseus, as well as the Minotaur, and of course some of the larger gods that have visited her father's hall. This is a slower paced book, as Madeline Miller's books often are, which some people might struggle with a little bit. But I really enjoyed just getting to see Circe's mundane activities kind of balanced out with some of those epic moments that made it into some of those well-known Greek plays. So definitely, or poems, I guess they were poems, not plays. So I definitely suggest picking this book up, especially if you enjoyed Madeline Miller's writing in the past. I would definitely say when reading this that I saw quite a massive improvement in her writing, which is pretty impressive considering her writing was already really beautiful in Song of Achilles. But I do remember thinking, wow, her writing skills have just completely bloomed in this story. So definitely worth a read. Next, we have another duology. This is a YA story, and that is Flame in the Mist and Smoke in the Sun. These have pretty fall-like covers here. This is by Renee Adier, which you may be surprised that I am recommending some of her books, seeing as the last two books that I tried from her, The Dawn and the Dagger, and The Beautiful, I DNF'd both of those. So I have, unfortunately, I believe, outgrown her work, but I did read this book back when I was a teenager and absolutely loved this. We are following a girl who I think on her way to be married, her caravan is attacked and she ends up escaping and dressing up as a boy and joining the group of people that had actually, I believe, attacked her caravan, in hopes of I think actually avoiding the marriage. There ends up being a relationship between her and one of the assassins, and I just remember absolutely loving the romance in this story. I also really enjoyed our strong female lead. Unfortunately, plot-wise, I don't remember too much of what happened, but it was just a really great time. And I remember the second book being as good, if not better, than the second book or the first book, which is always a good thing because sometimes they fall a little bit flat. But yes, I would recommend these books by this author, even if not her other ones. For my second to last book, I actually have a book that I read for one of my college courses, and I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this reading experience. And that is Water Lily by Ella Cara Deloria. In this book, we are following a tribe and focusing a lot on their day-to-day interactions, their ceremonies, their hierarchies, and just the tasks that they go about day to day and how it's decided who does what tasks. This book was written by an ethnographer of communication, which is why it focused so heavily on those topics, and why I tabbed up those interactions, because I took this for a communications course. But there was something so relaxing and immersive of just being in the middle of this group of people, and just seeing how they interact on a day-to-day basis, how they interact in different situations, from celebrations to tragedies, through experiences of birth and experiences of death. And just the writing was really detailed and really well done. For the most part, we are following the point of view of one girl called Water Lily, and I just really enjoyed her as a character. I think that this book is a really great book to read during the spring, just because of how entrenched in nature it is. And this is following a tribe before too many rules by the white people are imposed on them. We do know that white people are in the area, especially because we do follow a section in which they are suffering, I believe, from the smallpox, which they gain from the blankets of the white people. So they are present, but yet their oppressive rules have not yet dampened the culture of these people. So it's very much in full bloom, and you get to see it to its full extent. This author did a ton of research, and I think that really shows in this book, and it's a very almost intimate experience reading about this girl's life in this way. So it's relatively short, and I definitely think that it's worth a go. And for the last recommendation, we have The Antidote for Everything by Kimmery Martin. This is literary fiction and follows a female doctor who is working in a hospital that is deciding that it is no longer going to treat its trans patients. She is friends with a queer doctor who is refusing to follow those rules and is therefore fired because of it. So we follow her and Jonah, this other doctor, as they try to kind of fight against this and the impact that it has on them. This book also follows her as she starts up a relationship with a man. I personally think this book didn't need romance, that the focus should have solely been on the issue that was occurring with the hospital. But I think a lot of times people think they need to put romances in books for people to read them, but this book didn't really need that. But I do think that it was a very important topic for this doctor to cover, or this author. This author, I believe, is also a doctor. So I did really enjoy reading about this issue. I wouldn't say it's the best book to read if you want to read about the issues that trans people are having when it comes to seeking treatment at hospitals. This author is not queer or trans. They are a doctor though, and may have experienced this issue from their side of things, but obviously there are other people who are actually part of the trans community, or at the very least the queer community, who could better write about that issue. But still, I would think that this is a pretty good starting point to kind of touch on that issue. All right, guys, so those are my spring recommendations. Some of those books I haven't read for a few years, so the synopsis might have been a little shaky there. But let me know down below what kind of books you enjoy reading in the spring. And thank you as always for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!